Tragedy in Japan. The country and the world mourn the assassination of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Fight for the unborn. President Joe Biden signs an executive order that could strengthen abortion. We're at the White House. Pro-life pregnancy centers. A closer look at the work being done to help expectant mothers and their babies. And on the road again. The Vatican makes an announcement about the Holy Father's travel itinerary. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, July 8th, 2022. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. We start this evening with some tragic news out of Japan. Shinzo Abe, the country's former prime minister, was assassinated today in broad daylight. The 67-year-old was giving a street corner campaign speech in a western Japanese town. Moments later, a gunman shot him twice from behind. The former prime minister, Japan's longest-serving prime minister, was airlifted to a hospital and later pronounced dead. A suspect is in custody and has admitted to the attack, an attack which has stunned the nation and the world. Japan's current prime minister is calling the assassination, quote, an unforgivable act.
どうか一命を取り留めていただきたいと。
Fumio Kishida says that he was, quote, desperately praying for the former prime minister to survive. Unfortunately, that prayer was not answered. At the time of the shooting, Japan's current leader was taking part in campaign events. Parliamentary elections are scheduled for Sunday. A former U.S. president is among those reacting to the assassination. In a social media statement, former President Donald Trump remembers his fellow world leader as, quote, a unifier like no other. But above all, he was a man who loved and cherished his magnificent country, Japan. Shinzo Abe will be greatly missed. There will never be another like him. Others around the world are also expressing shock and sorrow, including Britain's Queen Elizabeth II. Shinzo Abe served as prime minister from 2006 until he stepped down for health reasons in 2020. He is credited with revitalizing Japan's economy. He also served to strengthen Tokyo's status in Asia. Overall, he won 6 national elections. He is survived by his wife, Aki. President Joe Biden says that he is stunned, outraged, and deeply saddened by former Prime Minister Abe's assassination. And this afternoon, he left a condolence message at the Japanese ambassador's residence. The president shared his reaction after making new comments about abortion. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, good evening to you. President Biden announced a new executive order the White House describes as, quote, protecting access to reproductive health care services, end quote. But later, during the White House press briefing today, they did not want to take our questions.
President Joe Biden called former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe a friend who cared deeply about the Japanese people and says he was engaged in the work of democracy even at the moment he was attacked. During a speech, he was asked by a reporter about the security situation in Japan after the assassination.
I do not believe it's likely to have, but I don't know yet, likely to have any profound destabilizing impact on Japanese security or Japanese solidarity.
Also in the Roosevelt Room, the president laid out his plan to protect abortion, despite the Supreme Court tossing out Roe v. Wade just 2 weeks ago today.
I'm asking the Justice Department that, much like they did in the civil rights era, to do something, do everything in their power to protect these women seeking to invoke their rights.
The White House says it will, quote, protect access to medication abortion, ensure emergency medical care, and protect access to contraception.
We cannot allow an out-of-control Supreme Court working in conjunction with extremist elements of the Republican Party to take away freedoms and our personal autonomy.
Pro-life groups like Live Action knew it was coming and fired back.
President Biden issued this executive order today to throw a bone to the pro-abortion movement, and it's truly horrific.
Even after the huge court victory, to no surprise, the fight to save unborn children continues nonstop.
When you're achieving a victory like this, you have to keep your foot on the gas. We have to push for full protection for preborn children in states where that's possible, where we work to abolish the true evil of abortion, protect families, protect kids.
In the press briefing room, where most questions from reporters revolve around what's being done to protect abortion access, I repeatedly tried asking about making sure taxpayer money does not fund abortions, but the White House refused time and again to answer.
Does this administration respect the Hyde Amendment, ma'am? Simple question. It's a real simple question. Do you respect the Hyde Amendment or no? You can answer that?
Michael,
you can't answer that question? So while the White House will not answer our questions, as you just saw there, we'll continue to ask. Meanwhile, after his speech today, the president was scheduled to head over to the CIA in Virginia to thank them for their work. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
A new report says pro-abortion protesters disrupted a Catholic mass late last month in Chicago. A police officer and other people escorted the demonstrators out of St. Joseph Catholic Church. The pastor says after a few minutes, the mass resumed. And for more on this story, including video of that incident, visit our partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. With the midterm elections just over 100 days away, the push is on by both Republicans and Democrats to win seats in Congress. Democrats have ramped up their efforts to make so-called abortion rights front and center with a multi-million-dollar ad campaign. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales has more.
The Democratic National Committee launched a 5-figure digital ad buy after the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. The ads targeted women 18 to 55 on both Facebook and YouTube in a number of key battleground states.
I've been very clear on my position.
Mehmet Oz, taking away control over personal health decisions. He's just too extreme for Pennsylvania.
Planned Parenthood vote spent $3 million alone on this ad in Pennsylvania, attacking Republican Senate candidate Mehmet Oz. Since the court's decision 2 weeks ago, Planned Parenthood and other pro-abortion groups have spent millions more on ads. A total of 56 unique ads and 8,900 airings in key election states, according to Ad Impact.
The Supreme Court has taken away a woman's most fundamental freedom, control over her own body.
In New Hampshire, Democratic Senator Maggie Hassan released a direct on-camera ad vowing to fight back against attempts to institute a national abortion ban.
And there are politicians like Mitch McConnell who've made it clear that their objective is to ban abortion nationwide. We will not be intimidated. I will fight and never back down.
Meanwhile, Republicans are fighting back, not just with votes, but with possible legal challenges. Senator Marco Rubio wrote to the Office of Personnel Management, charging the Biden administration with potentially violating the Hyde Amendment, which prohibits the use of taxpayer money to pay for abortions. Senator Rubio wrote in part, quote, "The Biden administration's actions and statements over the last several days are focused on undermining pro-life states. The federal government has no business promoting the killing of unborn children. I demand that the agency clarify that the federal government will not provide sick leave for travel related to abortion services." A number of polls show that Americans are more concerned about inflation and the high economy versus abortion. But Democrats say that they will continue to make abortion a kitchen table issue until the November elections. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
Churches are not the only buildings facing threats these days. Pro-life pregnancy centers are also under attack across the United States. But that is not detracting from the important work they aim to do. The centers help women through every step of their pregnancy by providing information and resources so that the mother can feel empowered to choose life. And joining me now to discuss is Jor-El Godsey, president of Heartbeat International. Jor-El, welcome back. Great to see you. A lot to get to today, but first, I want to get your thoughts on President Biden's executive order to help ensure access to abortions, and also how that may impact the work that you do.
Well, it's just really disappointing to see the President of the United States actually take time to support abortion access when really what's happening right now on the ground is, as you've already mentioned, Tracy, is pregnancy centers who are run largely by volunteers and staff thanks to the good work of local communities and not the government's help are the ones being targeted. So, but instead our president and the likes of Kamala Harris, who herself has attacked pregnancy centers, the leader of HHS, Xavier Becerra, has done the same thing. So it's not surprising, it's just incredibly disappointing that the administration has been largely silent on now what is now over 40 physical attacks against pregnancy centers across the nation.
Yeah, and you know, I know that Heartbeat International, you all have such a huge reach worldwide. For those who are not familiar, would you mind telling us a little bit more about your organization and all the good works that you do?
Thank you, Tracy. The Heartbeat International really was called into existence by the pregnancy help movement back in the late 60s, and we officially began in 1971. So we're over 50 years at this, and it's been spread around now in 83 different countries, 3,000 locations. And I was actually just getting out of the country when the news of Roe being overturned came down, visiting the Balkans, where they have 1 or 2 pregnancy centers for their entire nation in that region. And so they were excited about what was happening in the U.S. Many of our friends across the globe are excited because pregnancy help is something that all of us can and should support. I wish that, of course, the administration would do the same because, frankly, every woman should be loved and supported in her pregnancy. And that's exactly what pregnancy centers do. We provide, as you mentioned, material aid. We are helping with relationship counseling and also ultrasound and other medical services throughout her pregnancy and even beyond. Into some pregnancy centers even work with them until 2 and 3 years after birth. And so we're excited to be a part of the answer to abortion and not continue to see abortion being supported by our government.
Yeah, and Jor-El, I want to talk a little bit more about that. You know, we've heard this said a lot by pro-abortion advocates, you know, claiming that pro-lifers don't care about moms or their babies once the babies are born. So I want to talk a little bit more about, you know, that, also the importance of supporting women during their pregnancies as well as, you know, after they've given birth, like you've mentioned.
Well, one of the things that most people don't realize, and I'm going to use Planned Parenthood statistics because they're very illustrative. 9 out of 10 pregnant women that will walk into a Planned Parenthood will leave without their baby. And so that shows that their complete, really absolute sense about abortion, that they're going to ensure that the women that are visiting them are aborting their children. When conversely, about 9 out of 10 pregnant women who walk into a pregnancy center will keep their baby. And that's because they're shown alternatives. They're given the option to do something. They don't really want abortion. Most women don't choose it in the way that we may choose ice cream or buying a Porsche, but many women feel forced into that decision, and certainly Planned Parenthood and other abortion industry members take advantage of that, and I find that to be also kind of predatory profiteering as well. But pregnancy centers operate completely opposite. We're there to help her choose the life of her own baby, choose what really in her heart she wants, what we know together that God has wired her for, and how that is able to be served simply by loving and carrying her into those decisions, walking alongside her, understanding her situation and entering into it and helping her make that choice. The very best alternative to abortion is another person, and that's exactly what pregnancy centers look to do. And that's why we help be far beyond birth. That's why we are able to kind of connect her to the various things that she may not know about in her community that are there to help, but we do. And that's exactly what we're there to help her understand and help her to walk in.
Well, Jor-El, thank you so much for your time today and for everything you do. We appreciate it. God bless you.
Thank you, Tracy.
Coming up, a Central American government asks Mother Teresa's sisters to leave the country. Plus, Pope Francis is adding new travel dates to his calendar. Pope Francis is set to resume travel within Italy. The Vatican says the Holy Father will make 2 in-country pilgrimages during the last weekend in September. This month's trip to Canada is also still on despite the Holy Father's limited mobility. The religious order founded by Mother Teresa has been expelled from Nicaragua. The Missionaries of Charity were officially removed earlier this week. Police took the 18 sisters who were serving the poor in Nicaragua to neighboring Costa Rica. Nearly 36 faith-based institutions say they are divesting from fossil fuel companies. The organizations from 6 countries, including 5 dioceses in Ireland and 2 others in Canada. Divestment is expected to amount to more than $1 billion. Joining us now is Erin Lothes, theologian and professor at the St. Elizabeth's University in New Jersey. Dr. Lothes, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. Would you mind, could you tell us more about this decision and what specifically is meant by divesting from fossil fuel companies?
Sure, and it's great to be with you. So 35 new institutions have divested from fossil fuels. And divestment means prayerfully reflecting on our Catholic faith values and using those values to guide our investment decisions. Our Catholic faith calls us to care for creation and protect the sanctity of our common home. So divestment creates a healthier society for our families and children and for the poor around the world who are impacted by the climate crisis. By removing funds from dangerous and unhealthy fossil fuels and redirecting those funds into positive investments that serve the common good.
So I'm curious, what's the reaction been from the Vatican on this initiative?
The Vatican is very supportive, and I am part of the Laudato Si movement, and we work in partnership with the Vatican and invite all Catholics to join us in protecting the sanctity of creation and caring for creation, which is part of our Catholic faith. Please visit our website to learn more about the Laudato Si movement.
And before I let you go, what are your goals for the future? And also, do you have maybe other similar projects or other projects that you're working on?
Well, we would invite all Catholics to heed the call of Pope Francis to care for our common home and to prayerfully discern their own decision to divest. So we have resources that can help people ponder and prayerfully discern how they would like their funds to be invested and consider a commitment to divestment.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. Dr. Erin Lothes, theologian and professor at the St. Elizabeth's University in New Jersey. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Up next, U.S. military recruitment, taking a closer look at a concerning trend. A report from NBC News says every branch of the United States military is struggling to meet their recruitment goals this year. The all-volunteer force is not being filled because the amount of people eligible to serve has diminished due to issues such as drug use, criminal records, obesity, and possibly even the COVID-19 vaccine mandates. And joining us now to discuss is Tom Spoehr, retired Army Lieutenant General and Director of the Heritage Foundation's Center for National Defense. Tom, welcome. Good to be with you, and thank you for your service. First off, I want to get your thoughts on this recruiting crisis. How do you think we got to this point, and how serious is it?
Yeah, Tracy, it's about the serious it's ever been since the start of the all-volunteer Army and military in 1973. It's never been this bad before. And frankly, we have seen this coming for a while, but I think the Pentagon has really ignored the warning signs. In 2018, the Army missed its recruiting goals. They scrambled around a little bit, but they really didn't take any decisive action either way. And so I think we've probably seen this coming for a while. I think that the tough labor market and maybe the pandemic accelerated things.
Yeah, Tom, what do you think needs to be done to bring up the recruitment numbers?
Yeah, Tracy, a number of different things. But I think the first in my mind is that we need to reconnect America with its military. I think you can go through wide swatches of the United States, and people, though, they don't even know what the military does anymore. They don't know what the lifestyle is like. There's been a recent survey of young people that said that 50% of them don't even know that you can have a recreation or a hobby when you're in the Army. And so that, that speaks to me that they really don't understand the United States military anymore. And we need to get military people back into some of these states like the Dakotas, New Hampshire, Vermont, in order to reacquaint them with their military.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I want to talk about sort of, really on a serious note, with the recruitment numbers so low, I'm wondering what this means, for our national security, especially as our top military threat, China, is really building up its military.
Yeah, China continues to grow its military. Their budget went up 7% this year. Ours did not. It frankly, Tracy, has some bad implications for our own national security. And the clearest indication of that is the United States Army is cutting its size by 12,000 soldiers next year. So it's actually shrinking because it doesn't believe it can recruit the necessary number of soldiers. And so that's a trend that we don't want to happen. The Army was already very small. If it goes down by 12,000 as it plans to, it will be the smallest army that we've had as a nation since 1939.
We brought up the COVID-19 vaccine mandates earlier, and more than 60,000 soldiers now are not allowed to participate in their military duties due to their refusal to get the COVID vaccine. I want to get your reaction to that, especially, as we're seeing the military struggling to recruit people.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about it, Tracy. Coming up, I spent 36 years in the Army. I had to get innumerable numbers of mandatory vaccines. I think the number is 17 vaccines, not some of them annual, but some of them less frequent. And so as a soldier, I was used to getting mandatory vaccines, but I also can see what's happening as a result of this COVID vaccine mandate. There's statistics that say that young people, 33% of them haven't gotten the COVID vaccine and they have no plans to get one. And so as recruiters trying to recruit people, they tell them, hey, you come in the military, you're going to need to take the COVID vaccine. And that turns off a significant portion of people. We don't know that number, but it has to be big.
Yeah, and according to this NBC report, they're saying that of Americans who are ages 17 to 24 years old who are eligible to serve, that only just 9% had any interest in joining the military. Such a low number, I think the lowest since 2007. So I'm curious if you have any idea why there's such a maybe disinterest or, not an interest in joining the military.
Yeah, it's a number of things, different things, Tracy. One of them is the very strong labor market. I don't know where you work, but where I work, there's companies paying $15, $18 an hour to young people, that are still in high school to do jobs. And that's fairly extraordinary, and that the Army and the military has to compete with that. So that's one, the strong labor market. But then there's also this belief, that the military is becoming increasingly politicized. And you'll get that from both sides. The left, views the military sometimes as a breeding ground for extremism or racism. And then the right views the military as woke and a social experiment. And so the military is in a very difficult position right now, kind of being battered by both sides. And young people are very attuned to this. They pick up on these dimensions in these conversations, and they wonder to themselves, why should I join such a military?
And that brings me to my next question, Tom. I'm curious, what inspired you to go into the military and serve our country? What was your story?
Yeah, so I was in college. I went to the ROTC program. I really didn't have a lot of other options at the time I graduated from college, so I said, let's give the Army a try. So I didn't know much about it. But after I got in the military, I loved it. I loved the people that were in it. They taught me so much about discipline and self-control and how to lead people. And so I think that's a very common thing, that people sometimes come in the military not knowing much about it. But then after they get in, they realize how much it's doing for them. And it did so much for me, and it does lots for young people every day. It makes them into better leaders and better citizens.
Absolutely. I can say on a personal note, I've seen that in my own family as well who serve. Thank you so much, sir, for your time today speaking with us. And thank you again for your service, Tom. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.